Aliens chuckled at the captured old human until he declared, "You are predators, but we are apex predators." With minutes until systems failure, Morgan revealed his masterstroke. Hundreds of Union vessels simultaneously disabled across the galaxy. Standing before stunned alien leaders, he calmly issued his terms. "If we'd wanted war, you'd be destroyed." The balance of power had irreversibly shifted. The interior of the galactic enforcement vessel, Sovereign Talon, hummed with the efficient drone of its systems. Light from passing stars streaked across the viewports, casting ethereal patterns across the bridge, where Commander Zorax stood, with his forearms clasped behind his back. His exoskeleton gleamed under the blue-tinted lighting, mandibles clicking in a rhythmic pattern that his crew recognized as contemplation. "Status report on the human?" Zorax's voice resonated through his thoracic chamber, producing the clicking dialect of the Vixari. First Officer Nyx approached, her slender frame gliding across the deck with the characteristic grace of the Lyrithi. Her translucent skin shimmered as she handed over a data tablet. "The human remains in detention cell 14. Commander. Vital signs stable but showing expected weakness. Security Chief Krell has completed the initial bioscan." As if summoned by his name, the hulking form of Krell entered the bridge. His scaled body flexed with each movement, the musculature beneath rippling with barely contained power. The Draxian's yellow eyes narrowed as he approached his superiors. "The human is old," Krell reported, his voice a low rumble. 87 cycles by their measurement. Scans confirmed deteriorated muscle mass, bone density, and cardiovascular efficiency. No immediate threat. Zorax's mandibles clicked faster as he processed this information. And yet he approached our vessel alone, in restricted space. The Council will expect a complete report on human intentions within the next cycle. "Perhaps it is a diplomatic gesture," offered Nyx, her voice melodic and even. The human identified himself as Jackson Morgan, formerly an officer in their Earth Defense Coalition. "Former or current makes little difference," Krell growled. "Humans are forbidden from deep space expansion by Galactic Decree 7294. His presence here violates at least 14 Union protocols." Zorax scrolled through the data on the tablet, compound eyes flickering over the readings. "What interests me is how he managed to evade our sector grid for so long. One small vessel should not have penetrated this far without detection." Krell flexed his clawed hands. "Permission to conduct a more thorough interrogation, Commander." "Denied," Zorax responded immediately. "The human is fragile, and we need information, not a diplomatic incident. We will observe protocol." The bridge fell silent as Zorax studied the prisoner feed displayed on the main view screen. In stark, white detention cell 14 sat an elderly human male. His silver hair formed a halo around a weathered face, etched with lines of experience. Despite his containment, Jackson Morgan's posture remained straight, his piercing blue eyes calmly surveying the cell, as if assessing a new apartment, rather than a prison. "Curious," Nyx murmured. "He displays none of the anxiety patterns typical of captives." "Humans are unpredictable," Krell muttered. "It's why they're dangerous." "Or perhaps," Zorax countered, "it's simply the confusion of age. Activate the interrogation feed. Let's hear what this human has to say for himself." The detention cell door slid open with a soft hiss. Morgan's eyes shifted toward the entrance, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth as Zorax entered, flanked by Nyx and Krell. "Jackson Morgan," Zorax began formally, "you have violated Galactic Union space restrictions imposed on your species. Explain your presence in the real sector." Morgan stood slowly, his movements deliberate but not strained. Krell tensed visibly, hand hovering near his sidearm. The human's smile widened slightly at the reaction. "Commander Zorax of the Vixari," Morgan replied, his voice stronger than his appearance suggested. "Thank you for your hospitality thus far." A clicking sound emanated from Zorax, that the translation matrix rendered as laughter. You mistake detention for hospitality, human. Semantics, Morgan shrugged, hands open in a disarming gesture. I find at my age that comfort is relative. Nick stepped forward, head tilted in curiosity. You know the commander's species designation. You've studied us. Naturally, Morgan nodded. Just as you've studied us, though perhaps not thoroughly enough. Krell's scales flared slightly, a sign of irritation. Your frailty makes your arrogance all the more amusing, human. Did you truly believe you could challenge galactic authority alone? The three aliens exchanged glances that, despite their physiological differences, all conveyed the same sentiment: bemused superiority. A soft chuckle escaped Zorax's mandibles. You misunderstand. Chief Krell, Morgan said, unperturbed by their reaction. I didn't stumble into your territory by accident. My arrival was quite deliberate. The laughter ceased immediately. Explain, commanded Zorax, his posture stiffening. Morgan eased himself back onto the detention bench. When you reach my age, you learn that physical confrontation is rarely the most efficient path to resolution. I came to initiate a conversation long overdue between our civilizations. Nyx stepped closer, her analytical eyes studying Morgan intently. Commander, his vital signs show unusual stability for a human of his age. Heart rate and neural patterns suggest neither fear nor deception. Impossible, Krell growled. The human should be terrified. Morgan tapped a finger against his temple. There's something your scans haven't studied properly yet, Security Chief. Something humans have developed quite effectively over our evolutionary history. Before Krell could respond, the ship's alarm system activated with a piercing wail. The Security Chief's communicator buzzed urgently. Krell here, he barked into the device. Chief, Sector 7 sensor grid has gone offline, came a panicked voice. Engineering reports cascade failures in the quantum relays. Krell's eyes snapped to Morgan, hand moving to his weapon. What have you done? Morgan remained perfectly still, hands visible on his knees. Nothing personally, but as I was saying about human evolution, we've developed something you seem to have overlooked in your assessment of our species. And what would that be? Zorax demanded, as the alarms continued to blare. Morgan smiled again, tapping his temple once more. Patience, strategy, the understanding that true power rarely requires one's direct presence. Commander, Nyx interjected urgently. The failure patterns, they're systematic. This is not a random malfunction. Zorax's compound eyes narrowed on Morgan. You will explain immediately, or what? Commander, Morgan interrupted calmly. You'll threaten an elderly diplomat. That would violate at least 23 of your own Union protocols, by my count. The ship shuddered slightly as another system failure registered. Zorax's mandibles clicked rapidly in the Vixari equivalent of a scowl. Take him to the bridge, he ordered. Now. As the alarms continued to sound throughout the Sovereign Talon, system failures cascaded through Decks 3, 5, and Engineering. The ship's diagnostic displays flashed with critical warnings that spread like a virus through the vessel's command networks. 3 more subsystems just went offline, reported a frantic technician, as Morgan was escorted onto the bridge by a furious Krell. Life support remains stable, but navigation, weapons, and external communications are compromised. Zorax turned to face Morgan, who walked onto the bridge with none of the difficulty one might expect from a human of his advanced age. The commander's voice was tight with controlled rage. You sabotaged my ship. Not exactly, Morgan replied, glancing around the bridge with apparent interest. Think of it more as a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Demanded Krell, claws flexing dangerously close to Morgan's throat. Of why your assessment of humanity as a non-factor in galactic politics requires immediate revision. Morgan stated simply. Nyx approached, datapad in hand. Commander, I've correlated the timing of the system's failures. Each coincides precisely with the release of a previously interrogated human from Union custody over the past 6 standard months. Zorax's compound eyes widened slightly. Impossible. Each was thoroughly scanned and cleared. Indeed they were. Morgan nodded. But you were looking for weapons, for technology, for immediate threats. You weren't looking for information, detailed schematics of your vessels and systems, carried back in nothing more dangerous than human memory. Krell snarled, scales fully flared now. You expect us to believe humans memorized our classified engineering specifications? Not all humans, Morgan clarified. Specifically trained individuals with enhanced mnemonic capabilities, and not your entire technical database, just the specific vulnerabilities we needed. Another alarm sounded, and the main view screen flickered as power fluctuations rippled through the ship. You realize this is an act of war, Zorax said, his voice dangerous and low. It could be interpreted that way, Morgan acknowledged. Or it could be seen as a necessary demonstration of capability prior to meaningful negotiation. The choice, Commander, is yours. Restore my ship, Zorax demanded. I can't personally, Morgan replied. The cascade is automated and follows a precise sequence. But I can communicate with those who can halt and reverse the process. If we can reach an understanding. Nyx studied her datapad, her slender fingers moving rapidly across its surface. Commander, at the current progression rate, all non-essential systems will be offline in approximately 12 minutes. Life support will begin degradation 4 minutes after that. Zorax's mandibles clicked furiously. You threaten our lives to force negotiation? Not at all, Morgan said calmly. Life support will remain functional indefinitely. This is not an extinction event. Commander, merely an attention getter. Take him to the detention level, Krell growled. I'll extract the countermeasures. That would be inefficient, Morgan observed mildly. I don't personally possess the codes to halt the cascade. Those are held by individuals currently well outside your reach. What I do possess is the authority to contact them. Zorax stared at the human, compound eyes unblinking. Finally, he gestured to a communication station. You have 5 minutes to convince me not to let Krell proceed with his suggestion. Morgan nodded and walked to the station with measured steps. First, I should explain why humanity can no longer accept its containment within Sol system and immediate colonial territories. Your expansion violated established treaties, Nyx pointed out. Treaties signed under duress rarely last, Morgan countered. But more importantly, we've detected something approaching from beyond the galactic rim, something your long-range sensors haven't yet registered. As Morgan spoke, the lighting on the bridge dimmed further, emergency backups casting ominous shadows across the alien faces, watching him. 8 minutes until complete systems failure, announced a technician. The clock is ticking, human, Zorax warned. Morgan's weathered fingers moved across the communication panel with surprising dexterity. Indeed it is, Commander. For all of us. Decks below. Emergency teams raced through corridors bathed in the red glow of auxiliary lighting. Engineering crews attempted to bypass failing systems, while security personnel maintained order among the increasingly anxious crew. On the bridge, tension mounted as power fluctuations grew more pronounced. Krell paced like a caged predator, yellow eyes never leaving Morgan. 6 minutes, the technician updated. Morgan finished his work at the communication panel and turned to face Zorax. I've prepared a channel to my associates, but before I activate it, we need to establish preliminary terms. You are in no position to dictate terms, Krell snarled. On the contrary, Morgan replied evenly. I'm the only one who can prevent this vessel from becoming permanently disabled. That puts me in precisely the position to suggest a framework for discussion. Zorax's mandibles clicked slowly now, his initial fury giving way to a more calculated assessment. Proceed. But be aware that any terms must ultimately be approved by the Galactic Council. Naturally, Morgan nodded. I propose 3 preliminary conditions. First, recognition of humanity as a sovereign entity, with rights to colonize the currently unoccupied systems in the real sector. Second, unrestricted passage through Union space for properly registered human vessels. Third, a formal exchange of technological and medical advancements between humanity and the Union. Absurd, Krell spat. The Council would never— 5 minutes, interrupted the technician. Nix moved closer to Zorax, speaking in low tones. Commander, these terms are not substantially different from those granted to the Tellurian Concordat last cycle. There is precedent. The Tellurians proved their worth through centuries of peaceful interaction, Zorax countered. Humans have just demonstrated their willingness to commit acts of aggression. Not aggression, Morgan corrected. Strategic capability. There's an important distinction. 4 minutes to systems failure. Morgan stood straighter, the emergency lighting casting deep shadows across his face. Commander, if I may demonstrate one more thing. Zorax gestured permission with one of his forearms. Morgan activated the communication channel he had prepared. Immediately, a holographic display sprang to life from his wrist device, a simple band that had been deemed harmless in the initial security scan. The hologram showed a tactical display of the surrounding sector. Dozens of Union vessels appeared as blue indicators across the projection. As they watched, vessel after vessel began blinking red. What is this? Krell demanded. A real-time strategic display, Morgan explained calmly. Each red indicator represents a Union vessel currently experiencing the same cascade failures as the Sovereign Talon. Impossible, Zorax breathed, mandibles trembling. 3 minutes. Morgan expanded the hologram with a gesture. Not impossible, Commander. Simply the result of patient, coordinated planning. The same vulnerabilities exist across your entire fleet, an oversight in your quantum communication protocols that we identified years ago. Nix studied the display, her analytical mind racing. This would require coordination on an unprecedented scale. Precisely, Morgan nodded. Which brings me to my central point. Humans are not merely another spacefaring species to be contained and managed. We are innovators, strategists, and cooperators on a level that demands recognition. You expect us to reward this attack? Krell growled. This isn't an attack, Chief Krell, Morgan corrected. If we'd wanted war, your vessels would be destroyed, not temporarily disabled. This is a demonstration of capacity, followed immediately by an offer of alliance. 2 minutes. Zorax studied the tactical display, where nearly 200 Union vessels now blinked red. His compound eyes shifted to Morgan, reassessing everything he thought he knew about humans. You orchestrated all of this? A species we deemed primitive and physically inferior? You judged us by the wrong metrics, Morgan replied simply. Physical strength is merely one form of evolutionary advantage. Strategy, cooperation, and technological innovation are others. 1 minute to complete systems failure. Zorax's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered his options. Destruction of his vessel seemed inevitable without cooperation, yet yielding to what appeared to be blackmail violated every principle of his command training. Nix approached her commander, voice low but urgent. The human could have disabled life support immediately if destruction was the objective. This is clearly a negotiation tactic, albeit an extreme one. 30 seconds. Morgan stood calmly in the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. Commander, I'll need your answer. Krell moved forward, hand on his weapon. Commander, permission to— Denied. Zorax cut him off sharply. Then, turning to Morgan, transmit your signal. Halt the cascade. Morgan nodded and activated his wrist device again. Authentication code, Morgan 7 Epsilon Theta 9. Initiate restoration protocol. Almost immediately, The emergency lighting stabilized. Across the bridge, systems began to reboot, displays flickering back to life. Cascade halted, reported the technician, obvious relief in his voice. Primary systems beginning automatic restoration sequence. Morgan lowered his arm. Your ship will be fully operational within 30 minutes, Commander, as will the other affected vessels. Zorax's compound eyes narrowed. And now, human, you will explain yourself fully. Morgan nodded. Of course. But first, I suggest we establish a direct channel to Supreme Counselor Thax. What I have to share concerns the security of the entire Galactic Union. The next hours aboard the Sovereign Talon unfolded in a flurry of activity. Engineering teams worked alongside specialists, remotely guided by Morgan's human associates, restoring systems at a pace that impressed even the skeptical Krell. On the bridge, Morgan stood before a tactical display, outlining a situation far more dire than the temporary disabling of Union vessels. Our deep space probes detected the anomaly 6 Earth months ago, he explained, manipulating the display to show astronomical data collected from beyond the galactic rim. At first, we believed it to be a natural phenomenon, perhaps a rogue neutron star or black hole. Further analysis revealed artificial patterns consistent with propulsion technology. Nix studied the data with intense focus. These energy signatures don't match any known civilization in the Union database. Precisely, Morgan nodded. Whatever is approaching, it's entirely unknown to both humans and the Galactic Union. Zorax, who had been conferring with his restored communication systems, rejoined the discussion. If what you claim is true, why resort to such extreme measures to gain our attention? The Union has protocols for reporting external threats. Morgan smiled thinly. Protocols that require transmission through official channels. Channels closed to a species deemed too volatile for full galactic participation. We attempted to alert Union authorities through diplomatic backchannels 3 times. Each attempt was classified as speculative and dismissed. Krell, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. You expect us to believe humans detected something our entire sensor network missed? Not missed, Morgan corrected. Simply haven't detected yet. Our position on the galactic rim gives us certain observational advantages, and necessity has made us particularly adept at extending our sensory capabilities beyond their expected parameters. As if on cue, the ship's long-range sensors emitted an alert tone. A technician called out, Commander, we're detecting an anomalous energy signature from Vector 227 Mark 084, extreme range. Zorax moved quickly to the sensor station, examining the readings himself. His mandibles clicked slowly as he processed what he was seeing. This matches the human's data, he confirmed, turning to face Morgan with a new intensity in his compound eyes. You could have brought this information directly to a border station. And risked having it dismissed again? Morgan shook his head. We needed to ensure the message reached the highest levels of Union governance. Sometimes, Commander, the only way to be heard is to speak loudly. By crippling our fleet, Krell muttered. Temporarily, Morgan emphasized. And now that we have your attention, we're helping restore everything, better than before. Your engineers are already implementing the security patches we've provided. Nix approached with a data tablet. Commander, the restoration is proceeding at 327% of projected efficiency. The human specialists have identified several systemic improvements beyond the immediate repairs. Zorax's mandibles clicked in what Morgan had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. A curious approach to diplomacy. Human. First demonstrate vulnerability, then offer enhancement. A very human approach, Morgan acknowledged. We find it effective to establish respect before partnership. Respect, Zorax repeated, the word strange in his clicking dialect. You disabled 200 vessels to earn respect? No, Morgan corrected. We disabled 200 vessels to demonstrate that we could have done far worse, but chose restraint instead. The difference is crucial. The bridge fell silent as the implications of his statement settled over the alien crew. It was Nyx who finally broke the silence. Intelligence and cooperation, she mused aloud. These are the predatory traits you've evolved, rather than physical dominance. Morgan nodded. Throughout Earth's history, it wasn't always the strongest species that survived and thrived. It was the most adaptable, the most cooperative, and ultimately, the most strategic. Krell's scales had settled back against his muscular frame, his initial rage cooling into reluctant consideration. Physical strength alone does not define a predator, he conceded. Precisely, Morgan agreed. The true apex predator reshapes its environment, rather than simply dominating it through force. Zorax gestured to the tactical display, where the mysterious anomaly continued to approach. And now, you believe we face a common threat that requires alliance. I do, Morgan confirmed. My people have run thousands of simulations. Whatever is approaching cannot be confronted by humans alone, nor by the Union in its current configuration. We need each other. The communication system chimed, indicating an incoming priority transmission. Zorax activated the channel, and the multi-ocular visage of Supreme Counselor Thax appeared on the main view screen. The ancient Miriathan's cluster of eyes blinked in sequence as it surveyed the bridge. Commander Zorax! Thax's voice resonated with the harmonic overtones characteristic of its species. I understand you have encountered a situation of unusual complexity. Indeed, Counselor, Zorax replied formally. I present Jackson Morgan, human diplomat, who brings information of critical importance to Union security. Morgan stepped forward, bowing slightly in the traditional Miriathan greeting. Supreme Counselor, thank you for receiving this communication. Thax's eyes focused on Morgan with unsettling intensity. The Council has been monitoring the systematic failures across our fleet, followed by equally systematic restoration, an impressive display of both capability and restraint. Thank you, Counselor, Morgan replied. Though I regret the necessity of such dramatic measures, necessity is often the mother of uncomfortable choices, Thax observed. I understand you bring information about a potential external threat? More than potential, Morgan corrected respectfully. We have confirmed an artificial construct of enormous scale, approaching from beyond the rim. Our projections suggest first contact within 14 standard months. Thax's eyes blinked in rapid succession. Concern. Morgan had learned, in Miriathan body language. You have evidence to support this claim? Transmitting now, Morgan confirmed, nodding to Nyx, who initiated the data transfer. As Thax received and reviewed the information, Zorax moved closer to Morgan, speaking in lower tones. You gambled everything on this plan, the commander observed. If we had chosen aggression rather than cooperation, you would have failed. Morgan smiled slightly. I studied your psychological profiles extensively. Commander, the Vixari value efficiency and intelligent problem-solving. I calculated that once you recognized the strategic advantage of cooperation, you would choose it over conflict. A dangerous calculation. All meaningful change involves risk, Morgan replied. But I also had contingencies in place had you reacted differently. Krell, overhearing this, let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a laugh. Perhaps humans are apex predators after all. On the view screen, Thax had completed its review of the data, its many eyes focused again on the bridge. This information is concerning, the counselor acknowledged. The Council will convene an emergency session immediately. Commander Zorax, you will escort the human Morgan to Union Central to present this evidence formally. As you command, Zorax affirmed. And Morgan, Thax added. The Council will also address your unorthodox approach to initiating diplomatic relations. as well as your proposed terms for human integration into the greater galactic community. I look forward to the discussion, Counselor, Morgan replied with a diplomatic nod. The transmission ended, and the bridge crew returned to their duties with renewed purpose. Zorax turned to Morgan. "It seems you will get your audience with the Council after all." "That was the objective," Morgan confirmed, "though I suspect the discussion will be rather spirited." "Indeed," Zorax agreed, mandibles clicking in what Morgan now recognized as amusement. "The Council does not appreciate being maneuvered, no matter how strategically sound the approach." "Few powers do," Morgan acknowledged, "but necessity sometimes requires challenging established structures." Nyx approached, her translucent skin pulsing with the subtle bioluminescence that indicated excitement among the Lyrithi. "Human vessels are approaching. Commander, they signal peaceful intent and offer escort to Union Central." Zorax studied the tactical display, where a dozen sleek human ships had appeared at the edge of sensor range. "You planned for success all along." "I planned for all contingencies," Morgan corrected. "Success was merely the preferred outcome." "And if you had failed?" Krell asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Morgan's blue eyes met the Draxian's yellow ones directly. "Then humanity would have pursued other avenues. We are nothing if not persistent." Zorax issued orders to prepare for departure to Union Central, and as the crew dispersed to their duties, he extended one of his forearms toward Morgan in a gesture that approximated a human handshake. "It seems we have much to learn from each other," the commander admitted. Morgan carefully clasped the alien appendage, the gesture awkward but sincere. "That, Commander, is the foundation of true alliance." As the Sovereign Talon prepared to depart for Union Central, escorted by the human vessels that had appeared so precisely on cue, Morgan stood by a viewport, gazing out at the stars. Nyx joined him, her analytical mind still processing the day's events. "You took an enormous risk," she observed, "for your species and yourself." Morgan nodded. "Age provides perspective. First Officer, when you've lived as long as I have, you recognize which risks are worth taking." "We have much to learn from you," she admitted, "and perhaps some things to teach as well." "Undoubtedly," Morgan agreed. "The best alliances are those where all parties both contribute and receive value." Krell approached, his massive scaled form casting a shadow over them both. "The Supreme Counselor has updated our orders. We are to proceed directly to Union Central at maximum sustainable speed." "The Council is concerned," Nyx surmised. "As they should be," Morgan replied, turning his gaze back to the viewport where, invisible to the naked eye but present in the data, the mysterious anomaly continued its approach from beyond the galactic rim. "We have much work ahead," he added quietly. Krell studied the elderly human with new eyes. "Perhaps humans are apex predators after all," he repeated his earlier observation. Morgan smiled slightly. "Every species is the apex of its own evolutionary path. Security Chief, the question is whether we can become something greater together than we ever were separately." On the main view screen, the tactical display showed the Sovereign Talon and its human escort vessels moving toward Union Central, while in the far corner of the screen, the anomaly continued its inexorable advance. Humanity had finally taken its place at the galactic table. The real work was just beginning. The journey to Union Central took 3 standard days, during which the Sovereign Talon and its human escorts maintained a formation that reflected their new, tentative alliance. Morgan spent much of this time in conference with Zorax and his senior officers, elaborating on the data humans had gathered about the approaching anomaly and discussing the political complexities awaiting them at the Council. "The Myriothan faction will likely support our position," Morgan explained, manipulating a holographic display of the Council chamber. "They value information and foresight above all else. The Draxian and Krellnar blocks, however, will resist any change in humanity's status. Krell, who had been observing with growing interest, interjected. My species values strength and directness. Your demonstration aboard this vessel would actually earn their respect, if presented properly. Morgan nodded appreciatively. An insightful observation, Security Chief. Perhaps you would advise me on the appropriate framing. Zorax watched this exchange with clicking mandibles. You continue to surprise me, human. Most species seek to avoid Draxian cultural engagement, rather than embrace it. Differences should be understood, not avoided. Morgan replied. That's a fundamental human principle, or at least, it has become one through our often difficult history. Nyx, who had been analyzing the latest data from the approaching anomaly, looked up from her station. The trajectory has shifted again, 7 degrees along the ecliptic. This is the third such adjustment in as many days. Intentional course corrections, Morgan confirmed, consistent with our earlier observations. Intelligence, then, Zorax concluded, not a natural phenomenon. And intelligence implies intent, Morgan added gravely. The bridge fell silent as they contemplated the implications. It was Krell who finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically thoughtful. If these beings can traverse intergalactic space, their technology must be far beyond even the Union's capabilities. That is our assessment as well, Morgan nodded, which is why unity is not merely desirable but essential. As the Sovereign Talon approached the massive space station that served as Union Central, Morgan stood on the bridge, taking in the impressive sight. The station was a marvel of engineering, a vast wheel-like structure with radiating spokes connecting to a central hub. Various ships of different configurations docked at designated ports, representing the diversity of the galactic community. Magnificent, Morgan murmured. I've studied the schematics, but seeing it in person is quite different. It houses representatives from over 300 species, Nyx explained, pride evident in her voice. The central chamber can accommodate delegates from all member worlds simultaneously, and now it will hear humanity's case, Morgan replied. Though not quite in the manner originally envisioned by your council. Zorax approached, his formal command regalia now adorning his exoskeleton. We have been granted immediate audience. The council is convening an emergency session within the hour. Morgan nodded. Then it's time. The docking procedure proceeded smoothly, and soon, a delegation from the Sovereign Talon was making its way through the grand corridors of Union Central. Morgan walked alongside Zorax, with Nyx and Krell flanking them. Various alien species stopped to stare at the human in their midst, a rare sight in these hallways. They're curious, Nyx observed quietly. Humans have been largely restricted from Union spaces, Morgan acknowledged. Most of these beings have never seen one of us in person. That may soon change, Zorax clicked, mandibles moving in what Morgan now recognized as anticipation. The delegation arrived at the antechamber to the council hall, where a Myriothan attendant awaited them. Its cluster of eyes blinked in sequence as it registered Morgan's presence. The human delegate will enter alone initially, it informed them. Protocol requires preliminary verification of identity and intent. Morgan nodded his understanding. Of course. Krell stepped forward, surprising everyone. I will accompany him. Security protocols. The Myriothan attendant blinked rapidly. This is irregular. So is this entire situation, Krell replied firmly. The human is under my protection until formal proceedings begin. Morgan glanced at the Draxian with carefully concealed surprise. Protection was not something he had expected from the initially hostile security chief. The attendant finally acquiesced, and Morgan followed it into a smaller chamber, Krell close behind. Once the door sealed behind them, Morgan turned to the Draxian. Protection, security chief? Krell's scaled face was difficult to read, but his voice carried an unusual note of respect. You faced our judgment without fear. You disabled our vessels without destruction. You offer alliance in the face of common threat. These are actions my people understand. Before Morgan could respond, the inner door opened, revealing the vast council chamber beyond. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy filled the seats, their diverse physiologies creating a living mosaic of galactic biodiversity. Supreme Counselor Thax occupied the central position in the highest tier, its multiple eyes focusing immediately on Morgan as he entered. The chamber, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell silent. "Jackson Morgan of Earth," Thax's harmonic voice resonated throughout the chamber. "You stand before the Galactic Council under unprecedented circumstances." Morgan moved to the central platform, his steps measured and confident despite his age. Krell remained at the chamber's edge, a silent sentinel. "Supreme Counselor, honored representatives," Morgan began, his voice clear and strong. "I come before you today not as a supplicant, but as a messenger and, I hope, as an ally." A murmur rippled through the assembly. "You come before us having orchestrated the systematic disabling of 200 Union vessels," a gravelly voice called out. The speaker was a massive, gelatinous entity that Morgan recognized as a Varathi, one of the founding species of the Union. "A demonstration of capability," Morgan acknowledged without apology. "And of restraint. Had humanity wished to harm the Union, those vessels would have been destroyed, not temporarily disabled." "You admit to an act of aggression against the Union?" the Varathi pressed. "I admit to an act of communication," Morgan countered. "When conventional channels repeatedly failed, we resorted to more direct methods of gaining your attention." Thax's eyes blinked in rapid sequence. "And now you have it, human Morgan. Proceed with your message." Morgan activated his wrist device, and a holographic display expanded above the central platform. The approaching anomaly appeared in vivid detail, its trajectory clearly marked. "An unknown entity approaches from beyond the galactic rim," he stated simply. "Its size, speed, and energy signature suggest technology far beyond anything known to humanity, or, we believe, to the Union." Data points and analysis flowed across the display as Morgan continued. "We detected this anomaly 6 standard months ago. Our attempts to alert the Union through conventional channels were dismissed as speculative. Time, however, is not a luxury we can afford." The council chamber remained silent as the representatives absorbed this information. Finally, a slender, crystalline being that Morgan identified as a Luminar spoke. "Why should we trust human data? Your species has been restricted from deep space for valid reasons: impulsivity, aggression, unpredictability." Morgan nodded acknowledgement. "Valid concerns, from a certain perspective. Yet these same traits, reframed as initiative, determination, and adaptability, have allowed us to extend our observational capabilities beyond what might be expected of a restricted species." He manipulated the display to show comparative analysis of the anomaly's approach. "Furthermore, your own long-range sensors have now confirmed our findings. Supreme Counselor Thax has received this corroborating data from Union observatories along the rim." All eyes turned to Thax, whose many eyes blinked in confirmation. "The humans' assertions regarding the anomaly are supported by our own recent observations." A new voice entered the discussion, harsh and clicking, belonging to a Krellnar representative. "Even if this threat is real, why should human involvement be welcomed? Your species has just demonstrated its willingness to compromise our security systems." "And then to repair them," Morgan countered smoothly. "With enhancements that will prevent similar vulnerabilities in the future, from any source." He expanded the holographic display again, showing projections of the anomaly's potential impact. "What approaches is beyond any single species' ability to address. Our simulations suggest that even the combined current capabilities of the Union would be insufficient." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Morgan, waited for them to subside before continuing. Humanity offers not just warning, but partnership. We have developed technologies and strategies that complement Union capabilities. Together, we stand a chance. Separately, the projections are less optimistic. The Varathi representative's gelatinous form rippled with agitation. You threaten us with extinction if we don't accept your terms? I present facts, not threats, Morgan replied firmly. The approaching entity threatens us all equally. Recognition of this shared peril is the foundation of the alliance I propose. Thax's harmonic voice cut through the rising tension. What exactly does humanity propose, Morgan of Earth? Morgan deactivated the holographic display, facing the Council directly. 3 primary conditions. First, recognition of humanity as a sovereign entity with rights to colonize the currently unoccupied systems in the real sector. Second, unrestricted passage through Union space for properly registered human vessels. Third, a formal exchange of technological and medical advancements between humanity and the Union. He paused, allowing these points to register before continuing. In return, humanity offers immediate integration of our observational network with Union systems, sharing of our defensive innovations, and full cooperation in preparing for whatever approaches from beyond the rim. The council chamber buzzed with discussion. Morgan stood patiently at the center, his posture betraying none of the fatigue that might be expected of a human his age after such a prolonged presentation. The Luminar representative's crystalline form shimmered as it addressed the assembly. These terms are not substantially different from those granted to other species upon admission to the Union. The method of their presentation, however, raises concerns about human diplomatic methods. Desperate circumstances sometimes require unconventional approaches, Morgan responded. We sought conventional dialogue repeatedly before resorting to more direct methods. From his position at the chamber's edge, Krell stepped forward. If I may address the council. Thax's eyes blinked permission, and the Draxian security chief moved to stand beside Morgan on the central platform. As the chief security officer who first encountered the human Morgan, I initially shared the council's concerns about human methods and motives, Krell began, his scaled form towering over the elderly human. I have since observed their actions directly. They disabled our vessels without harming our crews. They provided immediate assistance in restoring and enhancing our systems. They shared critical intelligence freely. The council listened with evident surprise as the Draxian continued. My people value strength and directness. The humans have demonstrated both, along with restraint and foresight. These are qualities the Union should embrace, not reject, especially in the face of an unknown threat. Morgan glanced at Krell, genuine appreciation in his eyes. The security chief gave a nearly imperceptible nod in return, before stepping back. Supreme Counselor Thax's cluster of eyes focused intently on Morgan. The council will need time to deliberate on these matters. Human Morgan, you will remain on Union Central as our guest, while we consider your proposal. Of course, Counselor, Morgan agreed with a respectful nod. Time is precious, but wisdom requires proper consideration. As Morgan was escorted from the chamber, the representatives erupted in animated discussion. Zorax and Nyx waited in the antechamber, their postures revealing keen interest in the outcome. How did the council respond? Zorax inquired, as soon as Morgan emerged. With appropriate caution and interest, Morgan replied. About what I expected. Nyx's translucent skin pulsed with subtle patterns. And Krell's intervention? Unexpected, Morgan admitted, and quite helpful. Krell, who had followed Morgan out, made a dismissive gesture. I spoke only truth. My people respect those who act with strength and honor. The human has demonstrated both. Zorax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The council rarely moves quickly on matters of such significance. We should prepare for extended deliberations. They don't have the luxury of extended time, Morgan observed, glancing toward a viewport where stars glittered against the void. "Neither do we." As if in response to his words, an urgent tone sounded from Nyx's communication device. She accessed the incoming message, her bioluminescence flaring with alarm. "Commander, the anomaly has accelerated. New trajectory analysis indicates arrival within 8 standard months, not 14 as previously calculated." Morgan's weathered face showed no surprise, only grim confirmation. "As our simulations predicted, the entity is adjusting based on detecting our presence." "It knows we're watching," Zorax realized, mandibles clicking rapidly. "And it's responding accordingly," Morgan nodded. "The Council must be informed immediately." Krell was already moving toward the chamber doors. "I'll see it done." As the Draxian re-entered the Council chamber, Morgan turned to Zorax and Nyx. "We need to prepare alternate strategies in case the Council's deliberations prove too cautious or too slow." "You suggest acting without Council approval?" Zorax questioned, though his tone held more curiosity than accusation. "I suggest preparing options," Morgan clarified. "Humanity has survived by anticipating multiple possible futures and preparing for each. It's a habit I'd recommend to the Union as well." Nyx's analytical mind was already racing ahead. The combined human and Union fleets, properly positioned along the calculated approach vector, would still be insufficient without significant tactical innovations. Morgan completed her thought. "Which is why the exchange of technology I proposed is critical." Before they could discuss further, the Council chamber doors reopened. Krell emerged, followed by Supreme Counselor Thax itself. The ancient Miriathan's cluster of eyes fixed on Morgan. "The situation has evolved," Thax stated without preamble. "Your data on the anomaly's acceleration has been confirmed by our own sensors." Morgan nodded. "The entity is responsive to observation. This suggests intelligence and, potentially, intent. The Council has suspended normal deliberative procedures in light of this development." Thax continued. "We will reconvene in 3 hours to consider immediate action rather than long-term policy." "A wise decision, Counselor," Morgan acknowledged. Thax's many eyes blinked in a pattern that Morgan had come to recognize as intensely focused attention. "Until then, human Morgan, I would speak with you privately regarding certain contingencies that may not be appropriate for full Council discussion at this time." Morgan exchanged glances with Zorax, whose mandibles clicked in subtle encouragement. "Of course, Counselor. I am at your disposal." As Morgan followed the Supreme Counselor down a private corridor, Zorax turned to his officers. "Prepare the Sovereign Talon for immediate departure if necessary. Full combat readiness." Krell and Nyx acknowledged the order without question. Whatever was coming, the time for standard protocols had passed. The private conference between Morgan and Supreme Counselor Thax lasted nearly 2 hours. When they emerged, both wore expressions of grave determination, appropriate to their respective physiologies. The Council reconvened as scheduled, but what had been planned as a deliberative session quickly transformed into an emergency response coordination. Morgan stood again at the central platform, but this time he was joined by Thax, Zorax, and representatives from 7 key Union species. "The evidence is now incontrovertible," Thax addressed the assembly. "An entity of unknown origin and intent approaches our galaxy at accelerating speed. Preliminary analysis suggests technology far beyond our current understanding." The crystalline Luminar representative's voice chimed like struck glass. "What does the Council propose?" Thax's multiple eyes turned to Morgan, who stepped forward. "A joint Human Union Response Task Force. Immediate integration of our observational networks. Deployment of combined fleet elements to establish defensive positions." The Varathi representative's gelatinous form rippled with concern. "And the humans' original demands regarding sovereignty and expansion are temporarily set aside in favor of immediate security cooperation," Morgan replied smoothly. Long-term political arrangements can be addressed once the immediate situation is resolved. A murmur of surprised approval spread through the chamber. Morgan continued. Humanity offers its full, technological and strategic capabilities without precondition in the face of this common threat. Thax's harmonic voice resonated with formal authority. The Council will vote immediately on the establishment of the Joint Response Task Force, with Human Morgan serving as strategic advisor to Union Command. The vote passed with unprecedented speed, opposition melting away in the face of the accelerating threat. As the session concluded, Zorax approached Morgan. "A masterful concession," the commander observed quietly. "Offering unconditional assistance now virtually guarantees favorable consideration of your original terms later." Morgan's blue eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. Sometimes the best way to achieve one's objectives is to temporarily set them aside for a greater purpose. A very human perspective, Nix noted, joining them. Perhaps, Morgan acknowledged. Or perhaps simply the perspective of any species that has learned to balance immediate needs against long-term goals. Krell, who had been conferring with other security officials, approached their group. The first joint fleet elements are already mobilizing. Human vessels have begun integration with Union tactical networks. Morgan nodded approvingly. Good. We'll need to establish advanced observation posts immediately. If the entity continues to accelerate or change course, we need to know. As they moved through the corridors of Union Central, toward the command center where the joint task force would be coordinated, aliens of various species stepped aside, watching Morgan with new eyes. Where there had been curiosity and suspicion before, there was now a growing recognition, perhaps even respect. In the command center, representatives from human and Union military establishments were already establishing protocols for integrated operations. Morgan moved among them, offering guidance where needed, stepping back where appropriate. Zorax observed this with clicking mandibles. "You lead without appearing to lead," he noted to Morgan when they had a moment apart from the others. "An old human skill," Morgan replied. "Sometimes the most effective leadership is that which enables others to act with their full capability." "A philosophy my species could learn from," Zorax acknowledged. Morgan smiled slightly. "And there are many Vixari philosophies humans could benefit from as well. That's the point of true alliance, mutual enhancement." Their conversation was interrupted as a priority alert sounded throughout the command center. All eyes turned to the central display, where the tracking data for the anomaly had updated again. "Another course change," Nix reported, her translucent fingers moving rapidly across the control interface. "And further acceleration. New estimated arrival. 4 standard months." A tense silence fell over the command center as the implications registered. Whatever was approaching was responding to their preparations, adjusting its approach accordingly. "It's studying us," Morgan said quietly, "learning from our reactions." "A concerning development," Thax agreed, having joined them unnoticed. Morgan turned to the assembled representatives of humanity and the Union. "Then we must give it something unexpected to study. Initiate Phase 2 preparations immediately." As the command center erupted into coordinated activity, Krell moved to Morgan's side. "Phase 2 was not discussed in the council session." "No," Morgan agreed. "It was part of my private discussion with Counselor Thax, a contingency plan that now becomes our primary strategy." "And what is this strategy?" Zorax inquired, mandibles clicking rapidly. Morgan's weathered face showed the calm determination that had carried him through decades of human conflicts and crises. Not confrontation, but communication. Not defense, but directed engagement. He gestured to the display where the approaching anomaly continued its inexorable advance. "Whatever intelligence guides this entity, it's learning from us. So we will teach it something worthwhile." "A risky approach," Krell observed. "Indeed," Morgan acknowledged. But, as I've said before, sometimes the best predator is not the one with the sharpest claws, but the one with the most adaptable strategy. As human and Union vessels began moving into formation throughout the sector, following the new protocols established by the Joint Command, Morgan stood at the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the visible light lay whatever was approaching, unknown, powerful, and increasingly responsive to their actions. Nyx joined him at the viewport, her analytical mind still processing the rapid developments. "You've achieved much in a very short time, human Morgan. From prisoner to strategic advisor in less than a standard week." Morgan smiled slightly. "When you reach my age, first officer, you learn to value efficiency. And you've secured a path to everything humanity originally sought," she added, "without having to maintain your leverage over our systems." "True partnership doesn't require maintained leverage," Morgan replied. "Only mutual benefit and respect." From across the command center, Zorax watched this exchange, his compound eyes registering the unlikely alliance forming before him. Krell stood at his side, scaled form, imposing even in repose. "The human has changed everything," the security chief observed. "Yes," Zorax agreed, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Though perhaps change was inevitable. The question was always who would guide it, and how." "And now?" Krell asked. Zorax's gaze shifted to the tactical display, where human and Union vessels moved in coordinated patterns, never before seen in galactic history. "Now we prepare for whatever comes next, together." As if in response to his words, the command center's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from one of the advanced scout vessels. The message was brief, but momentous. The anomaly had changed course again, now moving directly toward the combined fleet's position. Morgan received the news with the calm demeanor that had become his hallmark. "It seems our new friend is eager to make our acquaintance," he observed. "Let's be ready to receive it properly." Human and alien alike turned to their stations, preparation protocols initiating across the combined fleet. Whatever was approaching from beyond the galactic rim would find not divided civilizations, but a united response, the result of an elderly human's audacious strategy and an emerging alliance forged in the face of common challenge. Humanity had indeed taken its place at the galactic table, and as Morgan had observed, the real work was just beginning.